Well folks, welcome back to the workshop. Another week and plenty more tools to be fixed, and we're starting this week off with a Hilti recip saw. Now why is this on here? We've said before, no longer doing Hilti repairs, not fixing their stuff anymore. We used to, but not anymore. The carriage alone, buying the parts on, is costing too much, so that alone is one of the reasons why they're not doing it anymore. But the other thing is we don't supply Hilti, so why should we be fixing their stuff? Plus there's an influx of this stuff coming on because their new stuff just isn't as good, and a lot of hire shops or crowd sell on their second-hand stuff is just flogging it off cheap, which means we get lumped with a lot of stuff coming on for repair, so we don't really want to be doing it anymore, so we've stopped doing them. Don't know why this came in, but we'll have a quick look at it anyway. She's a Hilti WSR 900 PE, and she's an old enough one, probably a 2004 or 2006. We'll fix it if it's simple. It's a bit odd for a start. She's a 110 volt machine, but she's a very odd shape. Does she work for a start? I might fix it if it's just a litre brushes. She's not doing squat. Very odd setup. Very light lead in this as well. Seems a good lead, but very light. Wonder if it's the original Hilti one. Right, lead's okay. And brushes aren't anywhere near worn out. Has this been modified or something? Look at that. Did you notice anything? This is just a modified Hilti tool. This is a cordless tool, look. If you take this bottom half off, this is actually a cordless Hilti recip saw. That's why she's the odd shape. This is probably one of the old NiCad ones. NiCad batteries are gone, so they must have just modified this. Changed the actual base of it. Instead of having 3 screws or 2 screws holding a plastic base, they've just designed this now and converted it into a corded machine. Because that there is a battery retainer. Oh, that's where the battery would have slid in. A modified cordless tool into a corded one. No wonder this isn't working right. Different controller fitted down in here. I'd say there's nothing on this, just the leads from the retainer coming out because there's no contact points on it. Yeah, I would say this is actually burnt out. Not designed for the load it's able to take. See the armature. See there, it's pulled away from that side. Let's see, that's melted and seized. It is too. Completely seized. The armature has overheated, melted the bearing, and the bearings melted into the plastic housing. So that ain't going to be fixed. I'm not ordering any bits for that thing. I wouldn't say it'd really be worth fixing anyway. She'd be better suited as a cordless machine, not corded. Never seen that before, especially from the likes of Hilti. Hilti nowadays is basically just a glorified hire company. That's one of the reasons why we're not taking them in anymore. Hire companies eventually get rid of all their hire machines and sell them off cheap. And that's what Hilti's doing. So people are buying big job lots of Hilti tools, faulty, at auctions and whatnot. And then they're rigging us to fix them. So we're just saying, no, I'm not doing the Hiltis anymore. That one ain't going to be fixed. It's going to be too much money anyway. But even the price of the parts another 30 on top of that for carriage just to get the parts on here. Labour, it's just not worth it. Not for something like that anyway. So that Hilti recip saw ain't going to be fixed. The same as every other Hilti comes on here now. We're not looking at them anymore unless it's just something simple like a lead and a set of brushes. And I just had to satisfy my curiosity on this. I am right. That was just a cordless Hilti recip saw from back, what, around 20 odd years ago. It was a WSR 650S or something like that there. A 24 volt NiCad recip saw. And you can tell it's the exact same thing because of the shape here. This here was just a plastic cover that came across here and had a wee round on it. 2 screws holding it on. That's what this here's for. This is where the battery actually slid in. So they're just taking this off, put one cover on, and converted it into a 110 volt. So this went from a 24 volt drill, small motor on it for a 24 volt battery, and now they're running 110 volts through it. No good at all. A very cheap way of doing things, to be honest, and that's one of the reasons why I do not recommend Hilti stuff anymore. Worse than that, this is about 20 odd years old for a cordless, as a cordless tool to run off a 24 volt battery that they no longer sell. Old NiCad batteries of Hiltis cannot get anymore. Hilti stopped doing them. They're completely gone. Worse than that still, they still sell this here particular model, this here 900 PE. This is still on their site for sale, and it's €1,350 for that there, for an old converted 24 volt recip saw converted into 110, and that's the money they're charging on it. 20 years old, and Hilti still think after 20 years of use and not been updated or modified and just been converted, it's still worth €1,350. That's terrible, to be quite honest, and that's why I do not recommend Hilti tools. They're the same crack with the nail guns, some of the jigsaws and grinders as well. They're actually made by other companies. Hilti just buy them from them, paint them red, put Hilti on them, which is acceptable. A lot of brands do the same thing, but then Hilti charge you 3 times the price for the honour. So that ain't no good at all. Now, next up is a wee Makita drill, a Makita cordless. That's the one you see all the time. The DHP 482, cheap and cheerful Makita drill. You get these with lots of kits. Loads of people have these things. This one ain't looking good, or at least ain't sounding or smelling good. That's burnt out. Right, to be honest, wasn't very fond of these whenever they first came out, because like this here, got a lot of them on for repair, constant problems, burning out, been destroyed, gearbox issues. But that wasn't the first year or two with it whenever they came out because they were worth a lot of kits and they were dirt cheap. Everybody was buying them for everything and all the things that shouldn't be used. People assumed Makita and thought it was a heavy duty drill when it just weren't. But now, a few years on, what's this one? 2021, so this one's 4 years old. A few years on, you still get them in, but you're getting them in after they've done quite a bit of work. Initially, you kept seeing them because they were new and getting burnt out. Still get them and burnt out, fairly new from somebody abusing them, but since then, I've seen these coming in, getting their 3rd set of brushes. The thing's still running, so they can do quite a bit of work. Biggest thing I find, it's not the motor. If you look after that is and use them within their limits, they're decent enough. But once they start being used in hammer mode and get thrown about, the spindle on the chuck starts becoming loose. This one's actually not too bad. But in terms of the drill, for the likes of carpentry, for light duty stuff, for drilling stuff in, maybe up to a 6mm hole in steel or something like that. Or for DIY, yeah, do the job. People using these on production lines and doing furniture manufacturing, and to be honest, I've had the same drills and several times over, get new brushes and bits and pieces, and they're still running. No problem if motors burned out. Next question, is this one going to be worth it? It's obviously burnt out. The windings are burnt up in her. So that's gone. But the feel's not. The stator. It's a different story when this here gets destroyed too. If it's overworked too much, this being cooked and burnt up and heated up, it gets very hot and the heat weakens the magnet. So if you don't have the magnet snapping on like that, it was very weak and soft. You have to replace the magnet as well, the stator. If if you do that, it might not be worth fixing. But when they do burn out the actual armature, these ones here have a different brush holder. So it hasn't done an awful lot of work on them brushes anyway. But the brush holder itself, normally when a brush machine burns out, the heat generated will burn up the brush holder as well, because it's only plastic. This is only a wee cheaper Makita drill. But they actually fitted a thermoset plastic brush holder. As in, it's only plastic, but it's thermoset plastic. As in, it doesn't just melt. It'll burn, but it'll not melt. So even though that's burnt out and got hot, the brush holder is still okay. So it's an extra €10 you don't have to spend if the armature burns out. But I still want to replace the brushes. They haven't done much. Maybe I could get away with them, but I'll just change them. That one especially, it's a little bit burnt there, so. Right, I think it needs a clean out for a start anyway. It's a bit rough looking on here. I think I'll fix this one. The armature isn't too dear. It'll be worth an armature and a set of brushes. So I'll clean that out a little bit, and I'll see if I have an armature in stock. So the part we want is the armature, and the brushes are just CB440s anyway. To get a part number for that. The only other thing that gives trouble in this here is the switch. Whenever it wears out, you have to replace that. That can be about €60 or so. Generally, it's not going to be worth it. The actual motor itself is a lot cheaper. You even buy the wee brass heatsink for the switch separately. You can get everything for this drill too. Part from, as always, Makita's big problem, gearbox, one problem. So if you strip out your gears, you're replacing the whole gearbox instead of just being able to buy the actual gear housing. That's another big problem with these, but that's just about every Makita drill now. So 11 is down here. It's actually two different numbers. That must be an old and a new number. I'll just go with the bottom one. Hopefully that's the right one. I might check my stock. So there is 3 in stock, and they're costing me €39. So that's the number I need. 619380-9. Now I just have to find them. They're up here somewhere. But they shouldn't be too bad because we change them often enough. There we go. And the other thing is a set of brushes. CB440s. Right, all cleaned out and ready to go. So if the armature was changed, this is the same as the new one anyway. Right, that's the way your windings should be looking. Nice and bright. They shouldn't be all dull like this, especially with the black ones in here. Get rid of that. And we'll fit this. So your field, your stator has got on here. And there's a wee triangle piece here. That sits in there. So it's lying flat with this here green mark on top. So just make sure you put that the right way. If you put it round back to front, it's not going to sit into the housing. You eventually have to take everything out of this to actually wash it out. So this is where all the actual parts go back in again. These things sometimes fall out and you don't have a clue where they go. So this little rubber piece sitting on just here. That way there. That's just a wee damper for the battery to hold it in place. Obviously your change lever and your selector, we know where they go. And this here wee piece of metal here then. That is just a wee spring, a leaf spring. That's your detent for locking in your positions, your mode selection, your drill, clutch and hammer mode. That's what clicks them into position. Make sure that's there. Also your selector for the first and second speed. If that becomes very weak, you can actually widen these here wee arms out. There's no wee metal locks on, it's just plastic. Springs under here, but there's the plastic here and the housing that locks it in place. If it comes very weak, you can actually just heat this up with a lighter or something and then stick a screwdriver on and let it cool. So it actually cools with a bigger hump to it, so it gives her a bigger lock. But this one here is actually alright, so we'll just leave it be. Just saves you having to replace it if it does become weak. And obviously your switch then. Drop in your LED first. And the wires actually tuck in under the switch. They're moulded onto the body so they don't interfere, and the switch can actually go down flat. Drop that in there. Hold back your little blue wire. Drop in your battery retainer, your switch, your forward reverse lever. Leave that all ready to go. There's your heat sink for your MOSFET for your switch. That was actually giving you your speed control. So that's clicking on there. Then the blue wire then is a static wire, because the fan cooling the motor is running air across this, which can create static, just in case anything discharges to the switch or the MOSFET to short anything out. This has a wee grounding wire then to stop any static. That's all wee blue wires for, which is really annoying as well, because when you replace the switch, it doesn't even come with a little brass spring. You have to actually grind off this here crimp and reuse this, unless you actually remember to buy that as well, and the wee crimp, which costs an extra €1 on its own. It's a bit of a rip-off. It should be attached to the switch. And the whole lot then should just strap straight down into place. Should go on nice and easy. And your little wire then just pokes in and it's pressed against the field. Just sits in there. And that's it. That's how you fit in a new motor or a new armature. Like I say, I've seen a lot of these getting abused, but now you see them coming on, lasting quite a while. You're probably wondering how anybody could buy this here thinking it's going to do heavy duty work, but you would be surprised. Only last week or the week before, I had a farmer. I was up in the shop working, actual hardware part of the shop. I was serving an old farmer that was looking for a drill for drilling gates. Just said general use, and he was convinced this was big enough for him. €150 or something for this small battery and the charger, and he was convinced this was what he was going to be buying. Had to actually press him to see if that would do him, because he just said he was drilling a couple of gates. He said this was fine for all he was going to be doing with it. And I was all for buying it. I pressed him to see what he was actually going to be drilling. He was going to be hanging gates on a farm, 20 of them all together, going onto pre-made posts that had already set. Weren't timber posts, so it wasn't like he was putting in a couple of screws. The posts were actual steel beams, like I-beams. He'd put them on the ground and set them on, and he was going to drill, I think it was 14 or 16 mil holes into all the posts in, 20 of them all together. And he figured this was going to do the job. Now, explaining to him that it wasn't big enough. He was having none of it. This is what he was buying. Had to just refuse to sell it to him. And he still wanted to buy it. And it wasn't until one of his friends, or a fella he knew, was actually downstairs, and he happened to ask him as well, and he just laughed in his face. Only then did he get the point that this was not going to be big enough. So you'd be surprised what some people will think will be sufficient for doing a job. Your man actually needed a magnetic drill, not a cordless drill or a corded drill. He eventually had to rent one. But that's what he wanted to buy. A wee small, one of the smallest Makita drills there was. That's that one. Up and running again. Nice one. She's a bit old news looking, but she sounds like a new machine. And even the chuck is still nice and tight and not too much play in it. So that will do that man fine. A wee DHP 482 with a new armature and a set of brushes. Ready for work. Now, next one is a Festool sander. My customer says he doesn't think it's the lead. And he's got a brand new lead. And he's got two other, what he thinks are good leads. But he doesn't know for sure. Wasn't sure if the leads, so he went out and bought a new one. But it still doesn't work, so he says it's not the lead. So I do believe him. Especially if he's tried a brand new one. Try to keep the brand new one good. Because if it's not the lead, he may as well leave it back again instead of spending another €50 on a lead. Try my one. Nothing. If it ain't the lead, it has to be something else. Hopefully something simple. She's got a bit of work done anyway. And as well, it is something simple. Tail already. See the armature? See the line down the middle? Or offset to one side actually. That's where the actual brushes have popped. That's where the little plastic insert was rubbing on. That's what's actually stopped the machine. So this should be a fairly simple one. Where's it even plugged in? Down here. Simple if I have the brushes, that is. Might not have these ones. That looks very long. I think that needs a wee blow of the compressor as well. That's better. You can see what we're doing at least. Come out, would you? Wasn't that one? Was that one? So that's where she's popped. So, new brushes needed. These are actually an oddball set. One straight and one angled. Now, these are the brushes. That's the number there if you're ever needing them. 494062. Now, price of these can actually vary a little bit. Normally, it costs around €20 for a set. But if you're buying it off the likes of Amazon or something like that, normally the cost maybe about 28 or €30. So they're actually coming with the holders and everything, not just the brush. Spring and all's changed them. So that money, it's not that bad. You'll be paying 15 or €20 for most brands just for the brush. So Festool's never too bad. I actually send you as well. Quite a heavy duty brush holder. In that there's cast there. And then a heavy spring as well. So they're not too bad for price. So to change them, all you have to do is to get one screw on top. Get that out. pull the whole thing out. So it was the angled one on top. Just have to work this around the switch. A little bit of wiggling to get it on, but it does go on without having to take everything apart. The actual lead then actually wraps around under the switch lever, which is a little tricky to do. So it actually goes back there and hooks on here. And lastly, just engage that spring on top and do the same on the other side. This one should be a lot easier. These brush holders are quite impressive. So that's actually cast aluminium or something. Don't think it's pressed out. Normally these are just a piece of pressed out steel folded over, so that's a wee cast part there. Quite impressive for all it is, and quite impressive for the price. Normally you don't get them like that. That's on there, and the brush is connected onto here. Wire tucks down there, and just give it some slack so the brush can move down with the wire. And that's it. Simple as that. New cable. I should run a treat now. And this also has a lock as well to lock up the rotation. Which is working fine. So it's a power sander also. That's her. One Festool 6-inch orbital power sander, the RO150 FEQ. Up and running, just a set of brushes. Next up we have another Trend router. Just done a video on one of these the other day. That was the Trend TE4. This one's the smaller and actually older one, the T3E. This is from 2002. 23 years old this thing is. Now the box says bearings question mark. So we'll see what the crack is here. She does turn. Yeah, it does sound like bearings. Yeah, something's grinding on there. Right, same as the last one. Swap out the bearings, just get it running again. Now this one, unlike the last, doesn't have a lock lever. Let's just use spanners, this one. Need a few more tools, but a lot more reliable. Them out. And remove the head from the base. The base does work. Yeah. Now to go underneath to take out these brushes. They're not on the side like the last one. Just pull that off to one side. Just so we can get the brushes freed out. Plenty of meat left in the brushes as well. Don't need to replace them. Now, this is when these wee machines were actually good. I actually have one of these myself. It's only a few years old, not a while old. They're nowhere near as good as what they were, what this one was like. I mean, look at the motor on that thing. Not that it's done much work, mind you, she's not worn on all that much. But, still over 20 years old, still running. We call it as a wee spring inside too. So, bad one's down here. This one ain't bad, but it's still slack, so I'll still change it. Same as the last one, there's a nut on top holding the bearing to get off first. It's actually threaded onto the armature, not the actual aluminium housing. I have to press that out then. It's not even that tight, only a quick wee press. She pops right out. We steel insert on there as well, and there's also a felt sleeve just for keeping the dust away from the bearing. Probably wouldn't find that on a modern one now. I'm back. There's Dad. Pop that out. Plenty of sawdust on here anyway, because that lock is threading onto the armature threads here. There's nothing thread onto the side, so dust eventually works its way in, starts getting stuck, compacted on. Not a big deal though. Stick it in there. Well, it doesn't really matter, it's not a big deal. Anything gets past that, gets stuck in the felt sleeve. The bearing, luckily, it's also not very tight. Pop that out. Give it a quick wee wipe. It's not going to need much. This thing's old, but it hasn't done an awful lot. and she's a 6003 big bearing and probably a 608. Nope, it's actually a 627. I'll just replace that as well. That's one. Bearing press for that one. This one should hopefully just drop on. It's not nice when they're that easy to fit. Pop that on. Make sure it's on. There we go. Felt sleeve. Don't know if I have to press this on or not. I didn't have to. No. It's tight enough. Your little metal sleeve over there. And then your metal nut then to hold that down. Now, stick the chuck back together. Wild-handed, there's a spring in there. You also don't get that anymore now. Collets can sometimes get jammed inside the holders, especially if they break. And if they break in, it's very difficult to get them out. Little spring inside makes that job a lot handier. Plus, just for releasing the actual bit. It doesn't need to be too tight because there's no bit on it. And I'll just give it a quick wee blow of the compressor. Not that it was all that dirty. Simple as that. Even the housing, look, is actual brass inserts. The machine screws, not plastic screws. This one was just bolt a little bit better. Drop the brushes back in. Make sure you don't lose your spring. Can drop off to the side if you're not careful. Matters which way this goes on, so we can go either way. That's her. Nice, sweet, cheap and quick fix. A nice, sweet, quick, cheap fix. A lot smoother. That's her. One wee Trend T3E with 2 new bearings. Next up is a wee Instafix. A Bosch STS roll. This is the GBH 2/26 DRE. And the customer needs us done in a hurry. But it's not a complicated fix anyway. Machine's working, running grand, and she's hammering no problem. The problem is in here. You can't put a bit on because there's already one on here. There's a broken bit stuck inside the tool holder. Quite common for any brand and quite easy to fix. All you need to do is basically just dismantle it. Take off the wee rubber cap. This particular model, there's another little clip here and a washer like the Makita. That's just to hold the cap on. Pop them off. Still can't take the sleeve off because there's another clip now down underneath that. And just prise it up. Take that out. Take off the sleeve. Probably give us a little clean as well. It's a bit dirty looking. And pull out that little ball. Take off the wee spring and plate that holds down the ball. And now there should be nothing holding in that bit. If it's loose enough, it'll just come straight out. You sort of need to get in behind here to push it out sometimes. It can sometimes be very stiff. If they're very bad, you might have to drill a little hole in it and then get a hammered punch and actually knock it out. Normally it doesn't come to that, but if they're a very cheap bit, they can sometimes deform and actually get chewed up inside and bind onto the tool holder. If that happens, you have to dismantle the whole tool holder to get in from the back to knock it out. This particular model isn't too bad, simply because it has pins. So this is a changeable one. This particular one has a quick release tool holder as well, or chuck. This one isn't that, but you can quickly get in to get to the back of it. So this here 2/26 Bosch drill, you can just take the tool holder off like this and remove the back of it to knock it out. But we don't need to do that, it's not all that bad. But it will just give us a clean anyway. We'll wash this all down and get it back together again nice and neat with some fresh grease. Now, that's a bit cleaner looking. And seeing as we have this off already, don't want to wash out on here, don't want to contaminate this, keep that inside when you're washing it. We'll just top up the grease whilst we're at it. Little touch, just put a little bit on there just to hold them pins on. Don't put on too much though, because if the hole's packed out with grease, the pin might not go in. And then first off, from there on, stick on your spring and your plate. A little bit of grease on there first. And your ball. steel ring on top, your sleeve, and then your retaining ring. Your washer, and your second little retaining ring. There we go. And your cap over the top. Simple as that. And your tool holder is working again. Very quick and easy fix. You could do even on the site, as long as you be careful not to drop any of the bits. Taking the wee C-clips off is the hardest part, but you can still take them on and off with just a screwdriver. That's how you remove a broken bit from your tool holder. One of these Bosch SDS drills. The same principle goes for any SDS. Now, next up is a wee Makita recip saw. Not doing anything. Right, this is the older one, the DJR 186. It's actually from 2016, so she ain't young. So this here one being a brushed motor, they can produce a lot of heat if they're overworked. I'm going by the front of her. It has definitely seen plenty of work. So you dog these here, they can suck in the amps, can generally tend to melt things inside or overheat them. So you're looking at melted battery terminals, burnt out brushes or melted holders. Obviously a burnt out motor or a burnt out switch. So we'll see which one she is. It's not the battery terminal anyway, because that's been changed before. That's new. We'll check the obvious stuff first. That's what normally goes. No, they're not burnt. They're okay. The holders aren't melted. Next we're going inside. So you had to have a common problem with the battery terminals melting. Same reason as these here melt. Taking too much juice, and the leads burn, and eventually burn up the battery holder as well. But I can already see that's not the problem, because that's been replaced already. That's not the same age. Yeah, a different connector as well. So I might have even done this one. So that's been replaced and the wire's been fixed. That's not the problem. Oh, there it is there. Blow and switch. That's a MOSFET for the switch for controlling speed. So that's part of the switch unit. So in other words, it's the switch that's gone. It's not so bad. It's a fairly easy fix. I also need this battery terminal. Okay, get rid of that. I've tried changing the MOSFETs before, in case you ask, to just buy these here online and just replace the actual MOSFET, resolder it on. I've tried that before with this here and SDS drills, and that generally doesn't work. Once you actually start the machine up, it'll run for a few seconds and very quickly just blow that MOSFET again. The problem is 90% of the time and the switch itself. Now, that's the switch we're looking for. part number 650760-0. That particular one costs around €50 plus the VAT, so it ain't cheap, but it's cheap enough to be worth putting on. Now make sure I'm putting these leads on right. Yeah, I think they face back the way. Should have paid closer attention when I was taking them off. Yeah, that's fine. The other thing is the heatsink. Do still need this. So it's an MOSFET that does the actual switching to control your speed. And that can produce quite a bit of heat. So to stop this actually burning up sooner than this one did, they attach it onto an aluminium or a copper plate, and that dissipates the heat generated by this onto the plate. It helps keep it cool. Now when you're putting these on, you're meant to put on a little bit of heat paste as well. Heat transfer compound just allows this to better transfer the heat from here into this. Now, I don't actually keep it in the workshop, but I do have it at home, so just take a little bit in the bag the odd time I need it. Not very often you do need it. That on there. Just make sure she's tight. You want a good tight fit, so it actually transfers the heat a lot better. And that's it. Ready to go. The polarity on these leads doesn't matter. This is just going back and forth. Doesn't matter if the motor goes forward or reverse. It's going to do the same motion. But these leads do matter. If you reverse these ones, it'll cook the switch. If it were a drill, you'd have to have these right, but for a recip saw, it doesn't matter at all. This here is only just acting as a lock. Just allows the switch to move only one way. That's her. Nice and easy. Relatively cheap. Now, one other thing I will just do, seeing as it is so dirty, is I can just wash out the front of it as well. Just put it through the parts washer and give it a quick wee rinse. Get rid of some of the debris in there. Plus for these things, recip saws get a wild bit of abuse. And generally they get a lot of water as well. Of course, water, the metal tool holder eventually starts to rust and these seize up. So wash them out every now and again, especially with a bit of oil. Does them a world of good. So just wash that out first. Now, make sure she works. That's her. One Makita recip saw with a new switch. That's her. The DJR 186. That's how you change the switch in them if you ever need to. That's her. Next up is a Hitachi grinder. This is the older one. Same machine as the new Hikoki ones. Same model, I think. G12 STX 2017. Sounds a bit gritty inside or something. Do the clean as well. Clearly seen plenty of work in oil. Pull those brushes out of the way so they don't catch. Yeah, something going on up in there. Right, give it a good clean out of now. It's actually this bearing that's gone. I was hoping it was going to be these two. Alright. That's different. What are the brushes like? Plenty of meat in them. Right. Might be too expensive to replace all the bearings. This one's definitely gone now. But you can't replace this bearing. You can only replace the actual mount itself. So that's your plastic housings, one piece with the bearing inside. You have to change that together. It's also going to need a little bit of a clean out now as well. So that could have a bit of debris in it. That bearing's failed completely. So we'll pull this off first and see. press that. Just get rid of some of the gunk for now. Keep that. Now we also need a shaft as well. That's the part we don't need. Right, don't need this. Do want the washer underneath. Get rid of that. And we need these two pieces. Now these particular Hitachi or Hitachi grinders, do be careful if you are repairing them. Don't go spending too much on them. They're a decent wee machine, they're readily available, and they're dirt cheap to buy. So the more things you have to replace, the more expensive it's going to be, and less likely it's going to be worth to actually fix. So this here costs about a tenner. That's the number there if you were needing one. 338849. Now it's just a bearing inside this plastic front housing. That'll be cheap enough if you place that on its own, but I'm not going to get away with these two bearings, especially that one. So I'm going to have to change them too. That is the most you'd want to spend on this here. If I had to change a lead in this as well, or brushes, this simply would not be worth it. Same way if I was changing brushes on the lead, if you had to change bearings as well, again, wouldn't be worth it. Doesn't matter if it's only this one. The parts can take this up to about 30 or 40 euro to repair. You can probably buy it for about 50 or 60. So this here should be cheap enough. It's just these here 3 parts. I'll not need anything else. Hopefully this will be worth it. But I'll have to change these as well. So press that off and replace them. What is she? 626. And I would imagine 608 is it? It's not to say these are wee cheap grinders as well, with very cheap parts. It's actually an NMB bearing in them. The bearing's actually quite good. And yeah, that one is a 608. The shaft on first. And then press this gear on. We just need the C-clip. That's fair. Ready to go. Drop on your armature first. Little sleeve on your bearing. Just put a bit of grease in the end to help it slide on. Not necessary, but sometimes help. Air deflector. And slide them on. Now, if you're doing this at home for yourself, you could probably spend a little bit more if you wanted. But if you're doing this as a business, you need to actually make money at it. That really is as much as you want to do with one of these here. They're just that cheap to buy. Makes repairing them very expensive compared to the price of buying them. So if just the bearing's been changed and no lead or brushes or anything else needed, this will probably cost around €40, hopefully. If there's any more, it shouldn't be much more. But even at that, it's still quite dear compared to buying a new one. This was left on with no name or number on it either. I think there's initials on it, but there's no phone number, so I can't even give the customer a ring to see if he's alright with this price. I have to just guess and assume they'll be alright with paying it. So, bit of fresh grease on now, and that should do the trick. Just like any grinder, don't be putting too much grease under the head. Too much is just as bad as too little, sometimes even worse. You start the machine up and you hear a popping, clicking sound coming from in here. There's too much grease in it. The gears are actually causing the grease to cavitate. Make little tiny air bubbles that pop under pressure, under load. They'll actually eat away the metal gear teeth. So if you hear popping noise, open it up again and take some of the grease out. But you might hear a little bit just on initial startup. Just as the grease gets worked around. If it continues, stop and remove some. It would have been better if it was just this one it went. It would have been a lot cheaper, but it's unlikely that one's going to go and these two other bearings will be alright. Normally they go first and then this one. That's her, sounding nice and smooth again. Not too bad for a 2017 machine, and at €40 it's not too bad a price. That's her.